All right, welcome back. Now we're going to talk about writing to CSV files. And there's actually two different ways of doing it. We can write using lists or write using dictionaries. And in this video, I'm just going to quickly show how to use lists. So the functions we want are writer. So this will actually create the writer, just like we saw reader. This is sort of the corresponding version, reader and writer. And then we have a dict reader, which we've already seen, and a dict writer, which you'll see in the next video. Okay, so writer. And then the method that we'll use most of the time is called write row. So here's an example. We open a file. We have to import writer from CSV. We open a file. That W is important because we are writing. And then we call writer, pass in the file, save that to a variable, call it whatever you want. CSV writer, something, I don't know. Then we just call .write row and we pass in a list. So each time we pass in a list, it will add a row to a file for us, and that's pretty much it. So if I actually just copy this version over, and I do a quick demo, paste it in, we can open fighters.csv, or let's actually just do some random file, like testing.csv, or let's do cats, how about that, cats.csv, w, and then we can leave this the same. It's important to note that to get the headers, it's just another row. So we pass that in. Let's do something like name, comma, I don't know, age. These will be my cats. And then we can write a row that is blue, comma, we need two strings here, by the way. Back down here, blue, and she is, I don't even know, is she 4, 3? And then we'll do one more line, which will be my unnamed kitty, who is less than 1. We'll leave it at that. Okay, so let's run this now. There isn't a file, cats.csv yet, but it still should work. If I run the file, okay, let's see what we get. Is there a new file called cats? Let's open it. So I'll do subl cats.csv, and here's our data. We've successfully written data using writer. Okay, so one more example I'm going to show. I'll make another new file, and what we're going to do is actually read in from one file and then change some data. We'll just uppercase everything in our example and then write it to a new file. So we'll read in from this file, fighters.csv, then we'll capitalize everything and then print it out. So to do that, let's make a new file. Let's call it scream.py. And we just want to start by from CSV. We're just going to use reader and writer. So we'll just import reader and writer. And then we'll do our with open, and our file that we're going to read from is fighters.csv as, and we'll just call it file. Then we'll do CSV reader equals reader file. And we can just double check everything's working by doing, I don't know, for row in CSV reader, as we've already seen, print row with parens, of course. And let's make sure it works. Okay, we're getting the data. So now what we're going to do is take this data and uppercase all of it and write it into a new file that we'll call scream.csv. Okay, so if we could just do a separate open. Well, we do need to do a separate open for the file that we're going to write to, which we could call, I don't know, screamingfighters.csv. We need that W because we're writing to it. As, and we'll just call it file again, and then we'll do CSV writer equals writer file. And now the trick is, basically what we want to do is take this data that's coming back, which is a list of lists. Well, it's not quite a list of lists, it's an iterator that's returning a bunch of lists, but if we convert it to a list, it will be a list of lists. And the simplest way to go through and just capitalize everything in there, not necessarily the most efficient, but the simplest for now, is just going to be to use a list comprehension, a nested one. So let's just make a variable called fighters. And it's going to be a list comprehension where we use CSV reader. And we'll do something like, it's going to need to be nested because we're turning it into a list and each row is a list itself. So we might have, let's go with s.upper for s in row like this, and then we'll put our nested brackets for row in CSV reader. All right, so for each one of these, we're going to go through each row, and for each row, we'll call each item S, and we're going to uppercase it. Let's see if that works. So we'll even comment the writing part out. And now we'll do for row in fighters. Print row. If we execute it, okay, everything's in all caps, looks good. Now all we have to do is take this fighters data and write it to the file. So down here, we'll just do for fighter in fighters. We want CSV writer dot write row fighter. And this includes the headers because the headers are inside of this. Even though it's called fighters, it includes the first row of headers as well. We uppercase everything. Like I said, this is not necessarily the best way of doing this. It's just a simple way of doing it where we're just uppercasing everything inside those nested lists. Then we don't need to print. And now this should work. Let's test it out. And to start a new file called screaming.csv. screamingfighters.csv, here we go. So we took this file and turned it into this, using both reading and then writing it back. But before we wrote it, we uppercased everything. Okay, so very last thing we can talk about. If we wanted to, we don't necessarily have to do it this way. We could nest things together. So instead of doing this fighters line, I could do this right here, indent all of that like this. And inside of here, I can access for fighter in CSV reader. But the thing is that each one of these is a list. So we want to write, what do we want? Write row. And then here, we want to do something like s dot upper for s in fighter. And let's see what happens. If we do it now, and we look at Screaming Fighters, works perfectly. But it's important to note that if I were to do it this way, and I didn't want to nest these things, I wanted to go like this, remember that this code closes the file, this file here, fighters.csv, after the with is done, after all that code runs. So if I did it this way, we have a problem because it's telling me on line 8, IO operation unclosed file. What's happening on line 8? I'm accessing CSV reader. And it's not a problem that, I made some random variable in here like num equals 1. I could access num right here. So it's not a scope issue. As you can see here, we get 1 printed out. It's a problem that arises because CSV reader is connected. It depends on this file being open. And so if I access it down here, that file's not open. So we have a problem. So the solution, which I just showed just a couple of seconds ago, was indenting these inside of one another because we're only really writing data while we're working with data from one file. So as far as efficiency, it's not a good idea overall just to keep a bunch of these files open all the time. But if what we're doing is just transferring data from one to another and slightly altering it, I think this approach works fine. Otherwise, we would need to make a new variable and save it equal to the list, like we did in the last example. I have it here still, like this. So I will put both of these as potential examples, and you can choose which one works best for you. I'll add some comments just a second. Okay, so there's the comments. 2 different methods, 2 approaches that work. One involves taking the data from CSV reader, iterating over it, turning it into a list, saving it to a variable that we can access later. And the other one involves using nested with statements and keeping that file open so that we can access directly from CSV reader without transforming the data first. Okay, moving on, I'm going to show you one other way of writing data to a CSV file.